Hi, my name is Karen Holmes. I'm the founder and director of the World Peace Organization for the One World Government. People all over the world are aware of the plan for world peace, and they're watching our government in this election to see if our Constitution will stand against a tyrannical president, a tyrannical leader, because they are dealing with tyrannical leaders, and they want to find out how they can function on a higher level based on the plan for the international government. The international government, it will be based on the U.S. Constitution, and they want to find out if it works. Will the Constitution give them the life that they would like to live, the life that they believe they have the right to live, but they don't see how they can solve their problems, how it can solve the problems. Okay, the international government will function on a higher level than the U.S. government because it will be a broader base of people, and by guaranteeing the rights of the people to be able to have a voice in their government, it will be a higher form of government than what exists in the United States. Okay, so today I wanted to talk about the election and Georgia and the runoff election and what's happening now with the resistance to the Electoral College vote. Our organization doesn't really uphold the idea of the Electoral College. It was created during a time period when travel was difficult. There was a communication problem. So they had like the 13 colonies, and they were scattered from Georgia all the way up into the New England states. All along there. So if there was a federal election, it would take a while for the vote to reach the seat of the federal government. Each of the states is responsible for their own election, and they figured that it would be, our founders figured it would be a better idea to have it that way. So they put into the system, under the time period, they put into the system this process where the states were responsible, but then they had to report to the federal level in a long distance away. And this was probably before trains and were built from Georgia to the Virginia area, the Washington, D.C. area. So people travel by horseback or by carriage, and that can take time. So they consolidated the idea into the Electoral College. And not only that, but there were people who were not real educated. The voters were educated. It was a very, compared to today, it was a very primitive system. So now there's a question whether or not, as our organization does this Article 5 Amendment Convention, where we take it back to the people and the states, the conventions, as they did in the Founding Fathers, a structural change, then what we're going to do is debate all of these ideas and how we are going to take this into the new millennium, so to speak, the next cycle where we're starting now, based on the idea of taking the Constitution to the international level. So it's not, all of this is being looked at now to see whether we like it, whether we don't like it, what are the pros and cons of all of these things. And each of the countries will have their own election process, and you'll be able to look at what we're doing, come up with a better idea, and decide what you like and what you don't like. Our government proposals, as we contract, our organization contracts out with various countries will help to set up an election process. In fact, that's my job as the head of the organization, the principal of the organization, to help set up the contracts with the different countries. So it's up to me to help each country that contracts with us to help set up an election process in their country. So let's look a little bit at what we're doing, what the United States is doing, how it works and why it doesn't work. And then we'll kind of apply that same information on the international level at this point. Now, as I said, we don't necessarily support the idea of an electoral college, so that would mean a direct vote. And this is all right in the infancy. We just have enough information to kind of like open this up for debate, what we like and what we don't like. So this is not something that where I'm saying this is how it's going to be done in your country, and if you don't like it, you know, figure something else out. You know, don't hire us. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm saying we're looking now at what works and what doesn't work and why it doesn't work and what can be done to make it better. Now, in terms of what can be done to make it better, our founding fathers, founding parents, had a way of functioning that was very. The delegates to each of the conventions would go there and they would have a problem. They would open it up for debate, and they had a technique that was quite remarkable. A form of brainstorming where somebody would come up with an idea, and if it gained support, then they would start building on it, and each delegate would build on an idea until they were able to make it go very higher and much higher, reach a better result. They came up first with the idea in the founding fathers came up with the idea: should we have a king in America, the king of America, and of a lifetime term, and how much power would he have, and whatever. And then they decided, no, that's, you know, we don't like that idea. So basically they came up with a republic, a democratic republic, so to speak, and then they built on that. But when they came up with the bicameral form of legislature with the two bodies, and then they had the legislative branch, the executive branch, and then the judicial branch, the three branches. And that allowed our large states and our small states to have representation based on population or distance or whatever, not distance, but population or size. And then so we'll go into all that in other ways. That's something that's fairly obvious. But what happened then was that each of the founders had a say in it, and they built on it, and they created the government. But then Patrick Henry stood up and said, but they were ready to sign it, and they stood up and said, well, what about individual rights? You know, we're looking at states' rights and we're looking at federal rights, the federal government rights, but what about individual rights? So that's when they came up with the Bill of Rights that addresses all these other ideas, the rights of the individual. So they said, we are endowed with our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So it created a three-level form of government where, in terms of individual rights, we are endowed by our Creator. Each individual person on the planet is endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. So we have our unalienable rights that peg us on a very high level. Like, let's say the father idea of the government. Let's say we have the father and the mother and then the son idea, or the child. We have the father who pegs in a traditional family. We have the father who pegs the family at a certain level in society. Let's say the person is a senator or the president of the United States, pegs the person on a very high level of society, has a voice in the government, has all this power, okay? Pegs it at this certain level. And then the mother idea takes it up or down depending on, this is the principles, and this is the power idea of it, is the application of the power. Are you going to use the power to benefit everyone and to solve problems, which is what government is supposed to do, or are you going to abuse the power and you are going to pull the government down? So it's, if you're standing on the principles of the power, of the principles of government, solving problems, equality under the law, okay, and then what happens is, then are you going to abuse power? And then you have the individual, or the states, basically, depending on the federal government, you have the people. So the people then, or the laws, basically, are looking at the idea of the principles and the power, and if it's both solving problems for the people, then basically it allows the government to function on a higher level, or if it's not standing on the principles and in its abuse of power, then it goes down. So we're looking at a continuum of frequency of government that is the application of universal law, because you cannot deny people their unalienable rights. Those come from our Creator, and they apply to everyone on the planet. But then the government is the application of that, and then that either functions to solve the problems or not to solve the problems, or to ignore the problems, and then the problems just get worse. If you have a problem with your plumbing and you don't solve the problems, eventually the problem is going to get worse. Okay? You have to solve the problems. Now, what I'm going to look at now is what's happening in our government. We have, let's say, the schism that has been formed. We have the schism came as a result of the Iraq War, the preemptive strike on Iraq. Okay, George Bush wove an illusion that said Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and the intent to use them. Okay, so he justified the idea. He said, I'm the President of the United States. I have the right to defend the United States from Saddam Hussein, who has weapons of mass destruction and the intent to use them against the United States. It's my right to do that. The Constitution gives me the right to defend the Constitution. In fact, that's my most important responsibility that I have. Okay, very few people went against that idea. There were some people who said Iraq is a sovereign country and there are no weapons of mass destruction because Hans Blix, the weapons instructor from the United Nations, hasn't found them yet, so it doesn't make sense to go after Iraq. But what happened was George Bush pushed it through, and he wove an illusion. He told, let's say, a grand lie. And by doing that, it was a sense of judgment against him. And by bringing in together all the coalition countries, he created this mass illusion, this what could you call it, a body of illusion that supported the idea of a war, that supported this idea. Now, everybody was in it kind of for their own ideas. Some people were in it they believed the lies. Some people didn't believe the lies, but they were willing to go along with it because they could line their pockets. They could function in their own way to gain more power. You know, I support the President of the United States, and that's what we're seeing now with Donald Trump. He's doing this, playing the same game this time, and he's using this idea of the illusion that he's told. He's been caught in many, many lies. He's created this body of knowledge that is based on an act of revenge, which is what the Iraq War was. It's an act of revenge, and people are in it for their own ideas. Okay, now let's step back for just a minute and say that the Iraq War was an act of revenge. It brought together 5 groups of people some were waging war, some were started a genocide based on judgment. Some people were in it for the greed and the contracts or how to line their own pocket. Some people were weaving an illusion to own people and to control people. And then you had the people who basically were denying other people a voice. Okay, they were playing the game of I'm not going to let you have a voice, and we're going to put you down, and we're going to stop everything from happening. Okay, now to go back further into history, you had the slaves coming over from Africa into the United States, into the Americas, when in the 1600s and 1600s, and there was a misunderstanding based on that. So racism, for example, the problem of racism in the United States is based on an act of revenge, a weaving an illusion that black people are different than other people, or the Native Americans are different, or the Japanese during World War II are different. They set it aside and they created an act of revenge. In World War II, because the Japanese were attacking our country in the Pacific, there was a fear that the Japanese were going to invade the United States. And in fact, I live in a town where in World War II, a Japanese submarine actually attacked our country, the United States, mainland the United States. This is something that's not very well known. A Japanese submarine, I live about a half a mile from the ocean here, and right off the ocean, right off Brookings, Oregon, a Japanese submarine was able to launch a small airplane that came over town here and up in the woods on the other side of town. He firebombed our force up here to start forest fires to create a sense of panic here. Okay, and after the war was over, he was so ashamed by what he had done that he donated his sword, his family's sword, a 400-year-old sword, to our library, and created a sense of sister cities with his town and his people. There's the place up here where there's like monuments, and the city of Brookings has the remarkable honor, I suppose you could say, of being a sister city because of what happened in Japan trying to bomb mainland the United States. So what we have now, not to get away with that, but that's just a little bit. If you come to visit our library in Brookings, you can see Fujito's sword. He said he was that kind of happened before I came here. He supposedly came, but I never was here at the time, so but you can read about it. It was an interesting city, the bomb site, and the only place. Actually, I think Dutch Harbor up in Alaska also was attacked, but this is the mainland, the United States, the only place where we had an actual attack by the Japanese. But the fear of that was very great around here. And certain people decided it was a good idea to create concentration camps down in California. And I'm sure there's a very rich history of that, where the people lost their homes. See, this is what's happening with revenge. There are 5 games associated with it. If you can put somebody down, you can judge them, and if you can judge them, you can take what's theirs, and if you can take what's theirs, you can own them. You can flummox them and own them, and if you can flummox them and own them, then you can deny them a voice. So voter suppression is actually a form, it's a power game associated with revenge, where people come together and they all play this power game to deny people a voice, to take what's theirs. Let's say to take what's rightfully theirs, to own them, flummox them, to maybe, let's say, some woman will complain about a black man. This happened in the past. And then, let's say my name is Karen, and one of the things is I don't particularly like to be called a Karen, because my name has become kind of synonymous with somebody who is calling up and complaining about black people moving into their own apartment or doing what's rightfully theirs, and then kicking people off airplanes or whatever. It's a form of flummoxing. It's a form of weaving an illusion. And how can you defend yourself from prejudice and ulterior motives? Then what happens is, that's the idea of presumption of innocence. This is what happened in Iraq. The preemptive strike on Iraq was an illegal event because it went against the idea that you can't defend yourself from prejudice and ulterior motives. You cannot defend yourself from prejudice and ulterior motives. But what you can do is, the courts are designed to defend you. If nobody will stand up and defend you, then it's up to the courts to do that. So the courts are actually standing up to defend the Constitution. They're standing up to make sure that everybody has equality under the law. Because universal law, which stands on the principles, is based on equality, liberty, freedom, compassion, abundance, capacity, and tolerance. That's what pegs our country on a very high level. When we have equality under the law, it works better than a civilization, a society, a nation, a local area, a community, a family that's based on intolerance and power games. So now, what is becoming evident in the United States, what I see happening, is that Donald Trump, now one of our not unalienable rights, our Bill of Rights, our constitutional rights, is freedom of the press. We have freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, and freedom of religion. That's our first constitutional right that we have. And our founders put it into our Constitution with the idea that they would give people the right to know the truth about their government. When the government stands up and reports lies, then, and the media is trying to report the press, in an oppressive society, the first people to be attacked are usually the journalists. Why? Because they're reporting the truth, and the people don't want, and the in power don't want the truth to come out. Okay, so undermining the media, the press, is one of the first signs of an oppressive government. Okay, the lies, where it's obfuscating the truth, is all this idea. If you believe you can put people down. So let's say that we have a Muslim ban, Donald Trump and his Muslim ban, or the walls where we're going to keep those Mexicans out, those Hispanic people. We're going to put up walls. We're going to deny people the rights. We're going to forget the women who've been accusing somebody of raping them or sexual abuse. We're going to marginalize groups of people, and we're going to put them down. We're going to judge them. I'm a Karen, but I don't ever call up and complain. I go on the internet and I talk about why it doesn't work. Okay, why this tactic doesn't work. And then we take what's theirs and then own them by flummoxing them and putting them down so they don't know. That's a form of slavery. That's where I don't know how to deal with a situation. How do I deal with a situation if people are targeting me? What happens if there's nobody who stands up to defend me? How about the idea of sexual assault, and the President of the United States has been accused of sexual assault? And how about a Supreme Court justice who basically, for his confirmation hearing, has been accused of sexual assault? Flummoxing women and making sure that they don't have a voice. That's what happens in the United States with these things. This is a form of revenge against various parts of society so that those people are denied a voice. Okay, it's a power game. It's a power game. So right now what we have is we have Republican senators who are basically grabbing for power right now, who are saying we're going to support all the lies. We're going to support Donald Trump, that he has a right to be president, and he doesn't because he didn't win the general election. He didn't win the vote. So we're going to just flummox people. We're going to deny them a voice. We're going to take what's theirs. We're going to do the same thing that the people in the South, where the black votes have been suppressed for a long time, we're going to do that in other states too, possibly like the Native Americans. How about the people who are let's say uneducated, the people who are easy to control and manipulate? We're going to control and manipulate people and make them our army. We're going to raise people up, and we're going to threaten violence. We're going to do this. Now, this is something that's happened in the South. And people all over said, you know, that's the way it's always been. And then what happened is the people moved out, black people moved out of the South, and then what happened is it's happening now with like the police. Okay, all of these things are happening. But now let's step back for one second, and we'll look at this idea from an even further standpoint. And we're going to look at Oxford and Stonehenge, and we're going to say that when there's a hostile takeover of a region, that people will come in like the Russians infiltrating into the NRA, for example. What happens if the Russians are moving in and Donald Trump says we have to get along with them? And he said, we're going to disregard Ukraine and we're going to support the Russians. And he said, what happens if now, what we have now is if our Constitution doesn't stand up and solve this problem of our security, our national security, what happens is that just like in Stonehenge, when our banks and our institutions, our economic structure is undermined because it's all up in the cloud. What happens if we have a cashless society? And what happens if we have all of these people coming in and can take over our internet and wipe it out? And what happens if these people are they're offered the chance to find out how the South has worked for a long time? Well, you'll have more power. You'll be able to stay in power a long time by maintaining this power base in your own state. Okay, how about Texas? How about Ted Cruz in Texas being able to stay in power? He sees the Democrats moving in and gaining power. In Georgia, you have Stacey Abrams, and then you have can't remember his name right now. He's the one who ran for president and did so well. But you know, you have Ted Cruz, who has power, but then he's got Trump and he's got the Republican base. The Republican base is based on their believing the illusion. Well, when George Bush invaded Iraq, 87% of Americans, or someplace in the 80s, supported the preemptive strike without understanding that the preemptive strike, you cannot defend yourself from prejudice and ulterior motives. Okay, so now, what we're doing now is we're seeing the United States being undermined by Russia and by China. They're moving in, and there's this group of people who believe we have to get along with Russia. They're our friends. Are they? No. In fact, we don't have any friends. What this is the scariest part of all, is nobody has any friends right now. And you're going to find out that everybody fits into one part, and everybody has different goals and are moving different directions. It's coming down, Armageddon, the schism is coming down to the individual level, and that's when people will vote. Some people have already come in, they like the idea, they think it's great. They've been slammed by people who are grabbing for power. They believe that the people who are grabbing for power are saying that you're responsible to, let's say the Republicans are saying the Democrats are responsible for the lack of power, and it's basically the power games. So now, this act of revenge, that's the first lesson that we're looking at right now. In Oxford and Stonehenge, the Iraq War. And now, in the United States, we're seeing, by taking away the unalienable rights, which is what happened with everybody's given their unalienable rights, and when George Bush got revenge on Saddam Hussein, he created this illusion, this mass of illusion, this body that is black and dark, and it's going out all over. It's separating people out. In fact, Jesus said, I didn't come to bring people together, I came to separate them. Now, why would he say something like that? It's because he was collapsing the old structure that was based on illusion, that was based on control, that was based on slavery, that was based on greed, and that was based on denying people a voice. The Jews, the Hebrews in the Old Testament, in the time of Jesus, they wanted a savior that was going to separate them from Rome, the control of Rome. And basically, he couldn't do it. It had to be this idea of a spiritual change, that a paradigm shift in people's thinking, and everybody's thinking, including the Romans. Took them something like 70 years before they were able to collapse that power base there. The people were ready to listen on how to create the life you want, that the principles of the Beatitudes. And I'll go into what Jesus taught at that time. But right now, let's just concentrate on the Iraq War, on the act of revenge, instead of accusing Ted Cruz or Donald Trump or whatever of undermining the security of the United States. But let's just look at how revenge works and why it doesn't work. Because what it does is it creates a sense of intolerance, and it creates a power structure that is very difficult to overcome. Except it's not difficult to overcome because they undermine each other. Nobody has the same goal. I'm going to go into this in greater depth. I just wanted to talk today about the election. Joe Biden won the election with the popular vote. These courts have upheld that. The U.S. Constitution has set this into place. But what these people are doing is they're grabbing for power to create a sense of a power structure to fight the Democrats for what they did, the terrible things they did to stand on the principles that government is by the people, for the people, and of the people. Or not necessarily in that order. Of the people, by the people, and for the people. Okay? So now, if you are in another country and you are a leader of a country, there's something for you to understand, is that your power base is based on, power is derived from the people. The people have the power, and the people grant the government the power, and then they turn it over to them and they walk away saying the government will handle this. And when the government stops doing it, that's when people rise and protest. And if the protests are put down, then it becomes violence. The last step before a country becomes a failed state is acts of terrorism, when people are denied a voice in their government. And that is, people have the unalienable right. Every person on the planet has the unalienable right granted to them by the creator of us all. Not a Christian God, not a Muslim God, not a Jewish God, by the creator of us all, I am that I am, and Lady Gaia, to be able to create the life we want without interference, to fulfill our purpose in life, basically, to be treated fairly and equally, and to have a voice in our government. When you take those away from people, then you lose your rights. So if you are standing up and solving problems that in your country, if you are doing the job, then you don't have to worry about the people rising up, because people know, people recognize oppression when they see it. Okay? We recognize it. We might be flummoxed. We might believe the lies. When we see something like Fox News weaving an illusion over and over again, that goes against the oath of office that every senator and representative and president takes to uphold the Constitution, because the Constitution includes the Bill of Rights. Okay, so these are when the Constitution also includes when to remove a president from office or an elected official from office for abuse of power, for taking those, not standing on the principles and then coming down and abusing the power to deny the people a voice in their government. That person is not going to stand long, no matter which country it is. Okay, so now that's all I wanted to say for today, and we'll go into all this in greater depth at other times. I just wanted to apply that today and have my voice, because that's what I believe very strongly in. Thank you so much for listening, and I ask that you like, share, and subscribe, and most important, share with your family and friends this information. Let them come in and then maybe use this as a tool for opening debate. Okay, and if you can come up with a better plan for world peace, tell us about it, and we'll all debate that. Okay, thank you.